And now, your host, Couch Tomato!
Hey, I'm Couch Tomato and I'm joined by
Hulk.
Welcome to Stuff for Movie Buffs, and today we're talking
Ready Player One.
All right, let's get into it. But before we do get into it, huge shout out to our Patreon supporters. I want to give a shout out to Ready for the Revolution, aka Alexandra Clay, longtime friend of the program, first time donor. So huge thanks for that. If you would like to support the podcast or YouTube channel or whatever we do, head over to patreon.com/couchtomatofilms. Support with any dollar amount that you feel comfortable with. Also, when you do that with any dollar amount, we'll also induct you to a private group chat that we have going on where we're able to discuss movie trailers, movies, and movie news. So feel free to do that. Send me a note. Usually I send you out the link to the private group chat, but send me out a note via email, which could be found in the description. Support the show. Thanks ahead of time for doing that. All right, let's get into it. So this week we saw Ready Player One. If you remember, this was actually one of my most anticipated films for 2018. The only experience, I'm not a fan of the book. I only know about it from a Community episode. Typically when Community chooses to reference a piece of a staple of pop culture, it's traditionally good. So, with this, I haven't read the book, but with my experience that I've gotten from the Community episode that they dedicated to Ready Player One, I was like, oh, this could really work because it's all about nerds. I'm a nerd. I love pop culture. So this is a movie for me. When the trailer came out, I wasn't too excited. I still said it was one of my most anticipated, but after that trailer, I thought, Hulk was going to make me eat crow. So that's actually the first topic that I want to discuss. I try to stay away from what critics are saying. I rarely agree with critics. Most of the time when I go on the site that should not be named, I'm usually on par with what the audience is saying. So with that being said, I want to get into what critics are saying about this film and is the criticism fair? So let's talk about that whole.
Yeah, with the critics, it was funny because this wasn't like my most anticipated. So I really stayed away from like trailers, promotion, and then lately I saw some of the positive reaction and it really got me. But with the negative reaction, it's like a lot of it is just, it stems from the book as well. Mm-hmm. They felt like it was kind of cliched a little bit with a lot of the pop culture references. Like they felt like it was just like, okay, they could have someone should have done more with them, and they also felt like the real world was lacking as far as like compared to like the OASIS. So with the book, I hate when people criticize directors or writers from not adapting a book a certain way, because I feel like once I have creative control over something,
let me do what I want to do.
Yeah, exactly. So if I don't necessarily borrow something from the book, same thing with comic book movies when they it's not the same as the comics. Let the director direct. He has the vision of what he outlined, of what he feels is necessary. So let him do that. And I think sometimes when I see criticisms like, oh, it's not the book, they derive too much from the book, or oh my gosh, they made I don't want to spoil the movie too much, but they made Iron Giant a weapon, this and that. I'm like, just stop. Like it's his movie. Let him direct. Like, you know what I'm saying?
And by the way, you're talking to the guy that took creative control or creative liberties over Jurassic Park, and that turned out great. So I don't know. Whenever I hear that stuff, my favorite franchise of all time, I've said it on the podcast before. I want to see if you remember. What's my favorite franchise of all time?
Favorite franchise? Okay, I know your favorite movie, but your favorite franchise would have to be Jurassic Park?
Nah,
it's
not even close. That's not. That movie only has like one and a half.
My bad. Ghostbusters.
Nah, I like part one. I like part two, but a lot of people don't like it. That's my favorite movie, but my favorite franchise is Harry Potter. Like, I like that over Star Wars. I prefer that over. Just because I love every film. I don't necessarily love every film that comes out of the MCU. I'm not really a Star Wars guy.
Yeah,
but a lot of people, when that movie first came out, they do say that's the best adaptation of a book to movie, and some people argue Lord of the Rings, but I remember when it first came out, a lot of people who read the books that had a problem with it, and I never got into the books. So sometimes a movie is supposed to introduce the content to a new audience.
Exactly.
And and sometimes a movie's 2 hours. Like, I'm not trying to stay in the theater for 3 hours. And when you hear some of the gripes, that's what fans want. Like, hey, you should have developed this, you should have whatever. So let's get into likes and dislikes territory. And we some of this piggybacks off of what, the feedback is. I don't know. Like, I remember, I don't have any relationship with the book, but I felt that the way that they stayed away from the real world, I thought that was a positive thing. Too. Because in the beginning, he tells you via narration that no, like, people escape the real world to hide in the OASIS. So it makes more sense that you develop the OASIS and stay away from the real world. Because guess what? The main characters stay away from the real world. You understand what I mean by that? So I thought that was pretty. I thought that was like a fair creative liberty. I don't know how much time they spend in the real world in the books, but I thought that was actually a good idea. And also, the one good thing that I can say is the film is polarizing, because the same amount, like you said, this wasn't on your anticipated list, but you wanted to see it after you heard the positive criticism. So there's just as much positive stuff out there as much as negative. So it is polarizing. The same amount of people who hate it love it. So I think that's a good thing. And when you bring up the pop culture stuff, I thought it worked.
Oh yeah, same here. Like, I loved every pop culture reference. I thought it worked. From the DeLorean to the Batman references, the Superman references, the Iron Giant, King Kong. Like, they were able to use it within the OASIS, which I thought was pretty cool. Like, because even like when it was just like, oh, no one gets past King Kong, I thought that was so cool, because it's like, you ever play a video game where it's just like there's always that one boss, like, where nobody can beat. You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody could get past. And it was just like, it was funny because when they brought the King Kong, I was just like, yo, that felt like a video game, like, where it's just like, it just took me back to all the bosses I could never beat, where I had to get help from my cousin or a cheat code or whatever, like, just trying to figure out how to beat this boss. So I thought it was funny, like, how they used King Kong, like, within the OASIS, like, right off the bat. Like, just little references like that, like, really, really got me into the movie.
But the problem that a lot of people have is, just from that 20-second soundbite of you praising the movie, you mentioned like 20 pop culture references. So
yeah, and there's more.
Yeah, so some people say that it's too much. I don't know. Like, I felt like, correct me if I'm wrong, you didn't get into Community, right? I know I tried to push you on that show, but you didn't really watch it like that.
Nah, I tried. I'm still trying. I'm gonna get into it.
All right, so with Community, there's a character. The reason I always tell people to watch Community, it's not the show itself. It is the show. The show's great because it's written by a nerd. It's so you're gonna get a lot of pop culture references, but the way because Community does the same stuff. It throws a lot of pop culture references at you, similar to the same RPM that Ready Player One does. But the way they do it, they use a avatar named Abed. He's a character who basically, if you're a nerd or a geek or something, you could put yourself in his shoes. And, like, if me and you were to have a conversation, we just keep bringing up, we talk about movies. Like, we could try to talk about business as much as we want. We could try to talk about industry. We could try to talk about television or something. But it always leads down to entertainment, right? So Abed is like that. Abed is a character who he's just like a walking pop culture reference. So every episode they use him to kind of like bring up the pop culture references, and it works. It works well because I'm like, oh, that's how I am. The avatar that they use in this game, in this movie, I keep saying avatar, which I shouldn't use because the word is used different in the movie, but is the CEO Holiday. Holiday is just like Abed. So the fact that he would create this world full of pop culture references, to me, it made sense. It's exactly. Like, no, that's Abed. It's not the movie. The movie's not doing that. The creator did that. You know what I mean? And the movie's almost a victim to the creator. And I won't call it a victim because I thought it worked. Like, so I didn't have a problem with that. I felt like this actually does it just as smooth as Stranger Things. You know, because when Stranger Things does this stuff, it's not in your face. Sometimes it's relevant to the plot. I thought the DeLorean fit. I thought, the Iron Giant fit. And like, I'm like, no, I really don't got a problem with it. So, and a lot of the critics that I have heard, because I did sit down and watch some reviews after I watched the movie. Some people is just too far gone from their childhood. It's not that serious.
Yeah, maybe, like, calm down.
Yeah, you're probably just not the intended target, man. Like, because sometimes you gotta know, this is Steven Spielberg. And we're going to mention his top 5 movies. One thing that's consistent with Steven Spielberg's career is, I don't know, like, the reason I respect him as a director, he pushes the culture forward. There's a lot of movies that he did that highlights Black culture that he didn't have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when you think of Amistad and you think of Color Purple, you think a Black person has something to do with getting that movie made. Steven Spielberg went out of his way because sometimes he picks like a disenfranchised group and he's like, well, I know this movie won't get made without me. I'm going to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
If you look at the whole AI situation, that movie got made because nobody else would touch it after director died. He says, I'll make it come to life. I got enough rank. But another thing that's been consistent with his career and his movie directing choices, man, he's in tune with his inner child. Like, he makes movies that he feels will connect with children. That's going to develop the next wave of future directors. And I think this is that. Like, if you're 21 and up, even if you're 21 and up, if you're 25 and up, this movie it's not targeting you. If you like it, like me, you're just in tune with your inner child, which I am. But I smiled in the theater like a couple times. I was by myself and I'm smiling for no reason. And I typically don't do that in movies. I'm like, this is good. I like this. This is what I've been trying to do with my children, because I try to force feed my children classics. Like, hey, watch Ghostbusters. What is it about, Daddy? And my kids don't know that, my kids can respect old version science fiction and computer technology and graphics and CGI and stuff like that. Because some kids in other households will be like, the graphics are so outdated. My kids aren't like that. They appreciate story. So sometimes I tell them what the story's about first, and they'll be like, oh, I want to watch that. So I put them on Back to the Future. I put them on Ghostbusters. I put them on The Golden Child. I put them on all these old school stuff. Mm-hmm. And I smiled at this movie because it basically did like 25% of my job for me. I'm like, oh, no, I like it. So I don't know. Any other likes on your end?
Yeah, like I just felt like you said, just to piggyback on what you're saying, like I felt like this movie is like ahead of its time in a way. Like I feel like it's gonna be something that people can watch, 10, 20 years from now, because I feel like one thing that Spielberg is good at is just he's good at in being in tune not only with his inner child, but as far as like the future in a way. Like if you look, like some of his movies are so timeless and so classic because they're so relatable today. Like even like movies that he produced, like with Back to the Future, like movies like that, like he brought to help bring to life, is just, they're timeless because he understands like where the culture is going in a way. And I think if you look at the Oasis and how it is, like I really feel like that's where the future is going, because even now with like with Fortnite, I don't know if you heard of that. It's like all these millennials, it's just, that's all they do. Like they're into this world where they're community.
The funny thing was, because that's what I kept thinking. This was already in production before Fortnite really caught fire. So he was already in before Fortnite. You had World of Warcraft and stuff like that, to where it's like you could tell that's where the culture was going. But the fact that Fortnite is so big, I think a lot of people will be able to relate to it. And then you mentioned where he knows where the culture is going. Hook was kind of like bashed by critics when it first came out. But now when you look at what he did with that movie, that's what Star Wars is doing now, where you basically take a character, a beloved character, and you kind of flesh out a side of their story that nobody cared about. Because basically the movie Peter Pan is about a boy who goes to Neverland, never wants to grow up. So the idea of Hook is what happens after the movie's done? Okay, what happens when he grows up? Technically, that's what they're doing with the prequels.
Yeah,
that's what they did with the prequels. And then they're also doing what happened before he got the Millennium Falcon. What happened before, they got the before episode 4. So movies started doing that, but they kind of criticized him like nobody wants to see a Peter Pan movie about an old Peter Pan. It doesn't make sense. But now everybody's doing
like nobody
that.
Nobody wants to see, old, Wolverine, all that stuff. Now you have an old Wolverine. You know what I'm saying? Like
that's a better example. That's a better example of what I just tried to configure. So great. So, but it's nice that we have so much good stuff to say about this film. But let's be fair and let's talk about some of the negatives.
I guess the negatives I would say is just, I guess it goes back to like this is not nothing new. Like at the same time, this is very like he broke ground a lot with this movie. Like I feel like it's gonna last a long time. But at the same time, it's just like, I have seen, people entering, Matrix with, Inception. Even like with it reminded me of the Lego movie in a way, like where it just felt like
it did.
Yeah.
That's the best example I could think. People kept thinking Willy Wonka. I'm like, this reminded me of Lego movie a lot.
Yeah.
Wreck-It Ralph. Wreck-It Ralph was another one, but go ahead.
Yeah, that was like the only criticism. There were some times in the movie where it's just like, okay, I've seen this before. So it's just like, like it didn't really, but I was still engaged. Like there was like the only minor gripe where it was just like, okay, like I've seen this before, but at the same time, like I still like Steven Spielberg's take on it, if that makes sense.
All right, this is my thing. So I don't really have a lot of negatives. And another praise I'll give the movie, it found a good excuse to use bad CGI, because that's one thing that scared me from the trailers. Like those avatars don't look good, but I'm like, it's part of the story. It's supposed to look like a video game. And I'm moving along. Steven Spielberg, he does this thing in his movies where the characters overact a lot. That's the reason why I didn't grow up with the Indiana Jones franchise. I came after the fact, and I love Raiders of the Lost Ark, but I know how people hate on part 4, but I'm like, part 2 is not that good. Part 2 ain't that good. I like part 1 and 3. I actually like part 4 ahead of part 2. That's how bad part 2 is to me. That movie's incredibly racist. Like there's some scenes in there that I'm like, that's not how Indians act, bro. Like, I mean, what are you doing? That's not what they eat. Oh my God, that's not sacrifice. I'm just whatever. Like the fact that people have a bigger problem with part 4 over part 3. But my thing that I've seen in Steven Spielberg movies a lot is the tendency to overact, which is what you see from the villain and what you see from the villain's sidekick. It's like the way he directs his actors, they act over the top. For some reason, nobody pays attention, and it only works in his movies. They do it in Back to the Future 2, which isn't his movie. It's Zemeckis. But I think Zemeckis comes from that school of Spielberg.
Like Spielberg heavily, he produced it. Like he heavily influenced that movie too.
Yeah. So it's like the way the villain acts, he's very cartoonish and he's over the top. And sometimes when you watch the movie, you're in a movie. But he does that in all of his films, so I don't really care. I really didn't have problems with this movie, is what I'm trying to say. Like it's just classic Spielberg. Because even the gripe that I just named, to me, that's classic Spielberg. So the best part of this movie is no doubt the references. So let's talk about the best references / Easter eggs that were found in the film. Try to narrow it down to 3, but there's a lot.
Oh yeah. I would say the first one that comes to mind will be The Shining. Like I thought the way they used,
I think that's gonna be everybody. Yeah, because it was used in the story. So much.
Like, and I thought it was used so perfectly, and it goes back to like what you said about like with Holiday. And it's just like, it just makes sense. Like he just reminded me like of all, the 1%, of geek, of the movie culture that like really loves, movies and all that stuff. That's something that they would do. You know what I'm saying? They would put like their favorite movies incorporate it into like their video game, into something that they're doing, because that's just how we are. Like we would have a list of all the times we watched a certain movie, or we would rank like all our movies. You know what I'm saying? Like the same way Holiday did that. And I thought him incorporating The Shining was just so cool, because it reminded me of so many, geeks friends that I have. Like it just, Like, and the way they used it in the film just really worked, like just with some of the references. And then they go too deep with it where it was just like, oh, if you didn't watch The Shining, you would get lost.
That's the thing. I probably watched Shining for the first time maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And the one black character in the movie, the best friend, the first best friend.
Yeah, H.
Yeah, okay, that's what it is. So it's H. So H is black, and H ain't seen The Shining, and that's not really it's not really a popular film amongst black people. And that's why I was like, I thought that was a joke in itself. It's like, you haven't seen The Shining? I'm like, nope. She's definitely right, because none of my homeboys have seen it, and I thought that was like hilarious. But I think that's gonna be in everybody's top 3. I actually have that listed as my top 2. The first one that I got is Gundam Wing, because I grew up in that Toonami era where it was like Gundam Wing, Dragon Ball Z, Ronin Warriors was extremely popular. When you came home, that 4 to like 6 o'clock block was just packed full of anime. And I just felt like, why haven't they made a Gundam Wing yet? That thing could work. You know, Hollywood, they'll just whitewash all the actors. But nah, it's something that could work from I thought that should have been made before Pacific Rim. You know, and I know for the longest, I think Leonardo DiCaprio was trying to do it. I don't know if it was Gundam Wing or it was another Robotech or something, but I thought that was like my favorite thing, because even though we won't get a Gundam Wing movie, I don't think we will for years, probably not until the year 2045 where this movie takes place. But I thought, okay, I kind of get my Gundam Wing movie, like here, seeing Gundam Wing go one-on-one with Godzilla. So that was pretty cool. So that's my first, and I got Shining second. So what's second of yours? Or just not actually number 2, but what's a second reference?
It's funny because I never played the game, but I like the fact that they used the the Atari adventure within the video game, which I thought was pretty cool, because once I seen that, it just took me back to all those times where like you're playing like Super Mario Brothers, and like there's like a secret pathway or a secret door.
Go back to the beginning, fly up, and then there's something in the sky. And the thing is, did you know about the adventure Easter egg?
No idea.
There's an Atari. There's a couple of them. I don't know. I don't remember exactly which one I saw, but there's a couple of Atari documentaries on Netflix as well as on the web and different outlets where they talk about the popular games from Atari. And Adventure was one of where they explained that's the first Easter egg. So I knew that was coming up soon as they mentioned the name. So that was cool. And I don't think a lot of people know that. A lot of people don't even know what Atari is, other than like a design on a shirt. So I thought that there was some. I like the fact that they started educating you on some of the some of the content instead of just throwing it out there. Honorable mention, that Prince wardrobe and then switching it to Thriller, I thought was awesome, especially when you know about the beef between Prince and Michael. So I was like, when he was getting dressed for his date, I thought that part was cool too. So yeah, those are my top 3. I kind of got I agree with 2 out of 3 of yours. I'm guess wait, you said The Shining
and the Adventure. My last one is the DeLorean. Like I just love that car. Like that's
yeah. I love that car too. Like if money ever entered my life, that'll probably be my first purchase. I don't really spoil myself too much. Like honestly, that would probably be my only big purchase, is to create a replica, stuff like that. That's why when H was creating a replica of the Iron Giant, I was like, no, as soon as she said that, I was like, well, people do that with DeLoreans and Ghostbuster vehicles.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need the authentic, just make it look like the real thing. So right now, this man deserves a lot of praise, which is Steven Spielberg, for what he's done for, movie making in general. I think a lot of directors aspire to be that guy, because he's one of the few directors, like, I want Christopher Nolan to be like that, but I don't know if it'll happen.
Hard. Like,
you know what I'm saying, right? What am I trying to say?
Nah, just like so much creativity. Like it's not just with directing, it's just with producing and the content that he produces as well. It's like, it's so much. It's not just he has classic films, but he has classic productions and what he chooses to make as well.
They're trying to position J.J. Abrams to be the next Steven, but the only thing is, I don't think J.J. Abrams speak to people like that. Like a lot of times his stories be off.
Yeah,
you know what
yeah.
I mean? Or it just be like, okay, you just remade Star Wars: A New Hope. You just you just, a lot of people say he ruined the Star Trek franchise. I like it, but it is also,
Me too. I don't think he ruined it.
Yeah,
Like,
to me, it's easier to comprehend for like the average movie fan or who didn't like Star Trek, because Star Trek is about science. And I'll tell you one thing, that new franchise has little to do with science. So it's like, it's all actions, 80s actions and stuff like that. So I don't think he's the next guy. But the thing I like about Spielberg is Spielberg will do a movie. Typically, you don't see this with directors. You either get a Michael Bay who knows how to sell movies. So say what you want about Michael Bay. Michael Bay rarely misses when it comes to box office. Like, you know what I mean? Like he knows how.
oh yeah.
He knows how to put a trailer together that's going to get people, butts in the seats. But then you have other directors like somebody who's like a Oscar darling. You got a Martin Scorsese.
Yeah. But even it took him a while to win his one. It's like the Oscars
But
are tough.
I'm not saying that though. But every time he goes it back though, it's considered. Like it's people are
true. True,
it's like, oh, this might. Some people just do movies where I don't think anybody thought Diary of a Wimpy Kid was going to be considered for an Oscar at all. I don't think people who do comic book movies consider those movies Oscar worthy. It's hard to do that. Logan is opening the door for that.
But it's still not there yet.
Yeah, I don't think people, like whenever you see comic book movies, rarely do they enter that realm. So Steven is that guy. Whenever he puts something out, it's like, oh, he could either entertain the audience or he could just turn around and say, all right, I'm going to win an Oscar this year. Like, I want Christopher Nolan to be that dude. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
I don't know if we've seen that dude yet. The next coming to that. But so let's go ahead and get into his top 5 movies of all time. And I'm not talking about box office. I'm not talking about Oscar-worthy pictures. I'm talking about these movies speak to you the best. And I got 5, but I also got an honorable mention. So the first one on my list, I know it's going to be on your list somewhere, is Jurassic Park. I just remember seeing this movie for the first time. And this was when, the funny thing is, I didn't have cable. So whenever this movie came out, 1993, I got exposed to it in 1995. And the same thing happened with, I felt like Terminator 2 was the thing that pushed graphics forward. But this movie did it too, to where it was like, wow.
Yeah, definitely.
Those things do look real. And it was a scary movie to me. But when I watch it now, there's so much stuff that I pick up in that movie that I like. I think the reason I like it, it's the same reason I like Ready Player One. It's the same reason I like Ghostbusters. It has a little bit of entrepreneurship in there, to where you're dealing with the CEO that's trying to give a gift to the world. Same thing that Holiday did is the same thing that the old guy did in Jurassic Park. Is the same thing that they do in Ghostbusters as well. Like it's about a startup. You know what I mean? Making millions, but instead of being greedy, let's share some of this wealth with the world. So I thought that part was cool. And just kids getting chased by dinosaurs. Anytime you see kids in movies that could act, I thought the young kids in this movie was more convincing, and that's the reason why I felt like Jurassic World missed the mark. But Jurassic Park is definitely my number 1 from him. What do you got next?
Yes.
What do you got? Is your number 1?
Oh, my number 1. Jurassic Park is on my list, but it's not my number 1 favorite movie from him. My number 1 favorite movie will have to be Catch Me If You Can. Like it was such a clever movie, and like right off the bat, like it just hooked me in. Like it was one of those movies where it was just like I couldn't stop watching it. I never got bored from start to finish. And then the fact that it was based on a true story even more like got me into it. So like, and it made, for me, like Tom Hanks and DiCaprio, like to me, it just solidified like their career in my eyes in a way. Like I love both of those actors, and the fact that, it was a Spielberg creation, just, I don't know. I just love that movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time as well.
Favorite Christmas song is Nat King Cole, Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire, because of that movie. And it's one of those Christmas movies a lot of people sleep on. So I actually had it at number 5. And the reason I took it off my list is because of the movie I put in the number 5 spot. But I put that as an honorable mention. Agree with you on that. It's the movie that made me start looking at Leo in a different light, because before that, Leo was Luke to me. He was the guy from Growing Pains. I'm like, that's that guy from Growing Pains and that guy from Titanic. He can act. And then I'm like, oh shoot, Jit could act. He holding his own with Hanks.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah. So number 2, like I said, I didn't grow up with this franchise, bro. I watched this when I was younger, but I never felt the need to continue watching the franchise, which was Indiana Jones. I watched Raiders of the Lost Ark when I was a jit. I just only remember scenes, and then for some reason, when I was talking to somebody about the film, I'm like, that's what Raiders of the Lost Ark is about? Hold on, let me go back and watch that. And this was probably 10 years ago. I went back and watched it, and I'm like, oh wow. And this is I always tell people this is a Christian movie. It's masquerading as a sci-fi movie because I just like the idea of artifacts from the Bible existing in the real world, and I thought that was just amazing. And I think the adventure genre is no longer a genre anymore, and this is when it was a genre. Like when you can make a movie about pure adventure. Now, typically, when you do a movie about adventure, you have to you have to throw action in there or sci-fi, to where it's no longer an adventure movie, it's a sci-fi movie, or it's an action flick. To where I feel like, no, I do think that people could be entertained by having a person chase an artifact around the globe. I think that movie's great. And also when you watch that movie, you kind of see his strength as a director, just some of the shots that he chooses to use. I'm like, is this all him or is this the cinematographer? Because it's a lot of camera work in this film that's pretty smooth. Like where it'll just be showing something and then the camera will pan back and all of a sudden you'll see a character burst into the frame, to where I'm like, this kind of made me respect him more as a director. So that's my number 2. Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, by the way, this is like the toughest list I ever had to make from you. Like it was hard because I had to leave a lot of good movies off this list, and that was definitely one of them. My number 2 would be Jaws. This was like the first time where like I was just really scared of a movie, like growing up as a kid, like where it's just like I didn't want to watch it. And then for the longest I was scared of the beach. Like it was just like I just know it's shark infested. Just from the movie Jaws, but it wasn't. To
this day, I'm not scared of the beach. I'm just not going out far like that. And I stay in Florida, so it's like, nah, like that it's real talk. And I put this as an honorable mention to it. It came close. The thing is, I loved Jaws as a kid. I was scared of Jaws as a kid. When I got older, I didn't realize how deep that movie was. That's another thing. That's kind of like the father of blockbusters as we know it today. Like when you release a movie in the summer and it's a big tentpole project, the way you see that studio, it's changing now because people are pushing their stuff into February and March. But movies didn't do the kind of numbers that Jaws did. And after Jaws, that gave them the license to do an E.T. After E.T., it gave them the license to do a Jurassic Park. So Jaws, a lot of people don't look at it like that. Like that's why I always tell people, like, no, horror genre was the first blockbusters. Yeah. And now those movies are so cheap to make, but if you needed to knock something out of the ballpark and get people in the theaters, you made a horror film. The person that made that up was Steven Spielberg. So I think this movie is extremely important. It was hard for me to put it into my top 5. I got it as an honorable mention. I only had 2 honorable mentions, and it was Catch Me If You Can and Jaws. And I may regret that later, but like you said, it was a tough list. Number 3, if this isn't on your list, I might just cut the podcast here. But E.T. I feel like E.T. is a movie that when you talk about, it's not a coming of age movie, but it's like, I put it in that group, that genre. Man, when you talk about being a little kid and thinking you could rule the world, I love movies like this, where it's like the world is in peril, but kids have to save the day. Sort of like a Goonies. You know what I mean? Yeah. Sort of like a Ready Player One, to where I like that aspect. So E.T. is the first movie I remember doing it. I just remember always, it was my dream as a child to get chased by cops while riding on a bike. Not today, because cops are so trigger happy, But
but you're right though. It's just like every time like I'm on a bike when I was a kid, like I always imagine that scene. Like I always like I'm and then I'll try to do a pop wheelie and I'm thinking like, okay, the bike is
or
I'm thinking the bike is
like when you press the brakes and let the back
like,
tires slide.
I'm thinking my bike is gonna start flying, but it never does. So
yeah, so I think I still love the ride, even though it's a little dated. I think is it at Universal Studios or Islands of Adventure? It's at Universal Studios. Yeah. So definitely my 3. What you got?
Then once again, please forgive me. This was the toughest list. I have ET as an honorable mention. My my third on this list would have to be Saving Private Ryan. This was like one of
the awkward part is that's the thing. This me and you, I thought we would have had so far. We've gone through our top 3 and we haven't even had replicas yet.
Nah.
Yeah, but
like with Saving Private Ryan, this was like one of the movies where it really showed me like the graphic nature of war. Like I remember watching this in my history class, and it was just so brutal. Like it was like sometimes.
Stop right there. Can you stop right there? I got a confession to make.
What's up?
I've never seen Saving Private Ryan for that reason that you just named. I'm very squeamish. I don't like to see gore, which is why the way the horror genre has kind of progressed over the years and the stuff looks so real, I have a hard time watching horror. I just really don't like to see people's insides, and when it looks real, even when I know it's fake. That's why I don't like to watch behind the scenes footage of makeup stuff. I can't get into it. I close my eyes to this day, even on comic book movies like Deadpool. I love the rated R rating, but there's a couple of scenes where I'm like, where the bullets go through the head, I'm like, I gotta close my eyes on that. Saving Private Ryan, I saw one scene as a kid. I've never been able to finish that movie. I've always told myself every year, I'm gonna get through it this year. Cause I know it's a powerful movie. I know it is, but war movies can't, I still haven't seen Dunkirk because of that. It's like, if I see limbs falling off, that stuff look real. If I see flesh getting ripped, CGI or not, it's hard for me to sit through that. And with this movie, I know it's some people's favorite from his catalog. Yeah. It's always been tough for me to watch it because some of the scenes and clips that I've seen online, I'm like, I can't do that. Even as a kid, I remember it used to come on HBO and Cinemax every day, and I was like, well, let me watch. My cousin finished it and I couldn't finish it. I'm like, I can't make it, bro. I'll sit this one. But go ahead.
Because it's just like it's weird because you know how like sometimes even now, well, TV's changed a lot, but even now, like sometimes when you're watching like your favorite TV show or even like a movie, they give like a certain character like an honorable death. Like you see it coming, they save the day. You know what I'm saying? Like the music cues and all that stuff, and it's just like you're like, okay, that my favorite character died. But with this, it's just like you're watching the movie, he's talking fine, and then boom, he's gone. And the same thing with like another character. He's talking fine, you know what I'm saying? They walk into a door, he gets shot, or boom, a bomb goes off. And it's just like, whoa. Like the deaths just happen so sudden, like with no.
Yeah, you know when to close your eyes. This one, it sneaks up
you
on
don't, and it's just like that's how it is in war, and it's just like at any given moment, like your time's up, and it's just like whoa. It really put me in that real world situation, like where man, these men, they went through a lot. And you know what I'm saying, like from World War II, World War I, you know what I'm saying, like all these different wars, and it's just like. It's tough for me to watch it, but then again, like I still watch it because of the emotional aspect. The performances are great, you know, with Tom Hanks, you know, Matt Damon, all that stuff. The cast is great too. Like you just see a lot of these young actors, and you know what I'm saying, at the time, and then how they progressed onto their careers. So yeah, I had to put it on my list. Like it was one of those movies where, like, you know what I'm saying, like I really felt like Spielberg really captured the moment.
And for me, 4, I'm gonna put The Color Purple. The reason I put that, when we were talking about Spielberg, I remember one of my older frat brothers, because I'm in a private chat with my frat brothers, and we talk about movies all the time. And we were just talking about best directors, and nobody could have touched Spielberg. Like, even though he may not be my favorite director, I always tell people, no, Spielberg is the best director. He's just not my favorite. You know, and you could put Scorsese in there too, but Scorsese do a lot of the same type of films. So it's like, he's not as versatile, but Yeah, I'm like, nah, you talking about the same guy who made Jurassic Park made The Color Purple. That doesn't happen at all.
Exactly.
So, and
exactly.
Color Purple is that movie. It's like, I felt like before Black Panther, people had Coming to America and they had Color Purple in the African American space. And it was like, I think Black Panther is going to like take some of that from the new generation. It's going to pull from that audience to where that's going to be the quotable movie they go to, you know, because every time you leaving a friend at the airport, it's always a joke. You always say, "You and me will never part, Mashi Dada." You know, like it was huge on the culture. But I also just, at the time, Steven was kind of like the golden child for the Hollywood industry, for the movie making world. And Quincy Jones was the golden child for the music space. He had did Thriller, he had worked with Frank Sinatra, and everything he had touched went to gold. So when you look at their Oscar recognitions and when you look at their Grammy recognition, they were on par. And when you look at, they kind of teamed up for this movie with Quincy making the music and Steven, you know, holding the camera. It turned out great, wonderful. You know what I mean? So didn't get a lot of praise from a trophy perspective. I think that they left some meat on the bone for that. But still, like I put that as number 4. I wasn't going to escape putting this as an honorable mention. I think this movie is more important than the numbers kind of like portray, like from a box office perspective. So that's my number 4.
My number 4 was, I guess, Jurassic Park. Like this is, I guess, like our first replica. So I guess I'm gonna go down to 5. And this was tough for me too, because like it was split because between Color Purple and Schindler's List, like who's gonna make my list. So I chose, I don't know if you've seen it, but I chose Schindler's List. This is one of those movies where you can only really watch once, and and it was one of those, like I said, this is another brutal movie, and it just like, it really showed me the depth and the evil of, you know, Hitler, of, you know what I'm saying, the whole Holocaust movement. And then one thing that I always like, what I loved about Spielberg is just throughout this whole movie, like I don't want to spoil it too much, like throughout this whole movie you have like, it's black and white, and then he has this one scene where this little girl's wearing like a red coat and like it stands out. And then
I don't know if it's spoiling, because it's a big Seinfeld joke about that kind of spoiled it for everybody. But yeah, but
okay.
Nah, it's on Netflix if you guys haven't seen it, because it's one of those movies where it gets a lot of praise. It's kind of like when you look up his best work, it's usually at the top of the list. A lot of people haven't seen it. A lot of movie buffs either too, because like you said, it is a movie that people you only have to see once. And it's part of pop culture, because there's a Seinfeld episode where basically Jerry got caught kissing somebody during Schindler's List, and the thing was, you're not supposed to get aroused while watching a movie like that. So yeah, nah, solid pick. Mine is Hook, for the reasons that I mentioned prior. It's like the way that movie was made is Hollywood caught up to it years after. Like, hey, tell us what happens after the credits. Not an after credit scene, but I want to see what happened. You know, like,
even as a kid, like I thought that was a cool concept.
Yeah.
Like I don't know.
You remember that show, Where Are They Now? VH1 used to do it.
Yeah.
This came out before that. So it's like, people were always interested in like, hey, what are some of our favorite musicians or actors or characters doing today?
Like what are they up to?
Yeah, and I thought that was just, like, think it's a solid movie. You know, a lot of people just hated on it, you know, and I just remember I watched the Siskel and Ebert, and we did an episode about it, movies that they got wrong. I watched the review and they were just harsh. I'm like, man, that's the thing. That's a lot of critics lose their inner child and it's over. 'Cause I always felt Roger had his inner child. Siskel, not so much, but even Roger couldn't connect with that movie. So I thought that was great. You have a solid list too, strong 5, and Spielberg is definitely the man. So anxious to hear what you guys think. Have you seen Ready Player One? Do you want to see Ready Player One? Let us know, and hit us up in the comment section. Is the criticism fair? Too much pop culture references? Not enough? Let us know. So all in all, guys, it's about that time. I want to thank you guys for joining us. Before you leave, if you like what you heard, share it with a friend on Apple Podcasts or wherever you go for your podcasts. Don't let this be the last time we hear from you or you hear from us. Support the show and become a sponsor by visiting patreon.com/CouchTomatoFilms. Join us next week and make sure to check out the show notes on where to find us weekly. It's Couch Tomato Films on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, and Couch Tomato Film on Twitter. Other than that, peace.